Welcome back to Nighttime History. Tonight we step through heavy wooden doors into the hushed world of a medieval stone cloister school, where winter evenings stretch long and knowledge glows by candlelight. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. Find your most comfortable position, pull your blankets close, and let yourself settle in as we explore how learning survived and thrived through the coldest, darkest months of the medieval year. The heavy oak door closes behind you with a soft thud that echoes through stone corridors. Your breath forms small clouds in the crisp air as you enter this world of learning carved from limestone and devotion. The year is 1250, and winter has settled deep into the bones of this Benedictine cloister school in northern France. Thick walls rise around you, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands trailing along them in the darkness. These stones remember centuries of footsteps, whispered prayers, and the scratch of quills against parchment. Most people imagine medieval students shivering miserably through winter, but actually, these stone buildings held warmth better than wooden structures. The thick walls absorbed heat during the day and released it slowly through the night. Clever architects designed these spaces with winter in mind. Small windows kept out harsh winds, while still allowing precious daylight to filter in. Deep recesses in the walls created cozy nooks where a single candle could warm a reader's hands and illuminate a precious book. You move deeper into the cloister, your soft leather shoes silent on worn stone floors. The corridors form a perfect square around a central courtyard, creating what medieval builders called the perfect geometry of learning. Each side serves a different purpose. To your left, the scriptorium, where manuscripts are copied and illuminated. Ahead, the library with its chained books and reading lecterns. To your right, the chapter house where lessons unfold each day. Behind you, the warming room, the only space in the entire complex with a proper fireplace. The air carries the scent of parchment and ink mixed with something else, beeswax. Dozens of candles burn throughout these halls, their flames dancing in the draughts that slip between stones. Contrary to popular belief, medieval people were not stumbling around in total darkness. Monasteries like this one consumed enormous quantities of candles. The brothers kept their own beehives and knew the secret of making candles that burned cleanly for hours without smoking. A soft bell chimes in the distance. Compline, the final prayer service of the day, has ended. Now begins what the brothers call the Great Silence, lasting until dawn. But silence here does not mean emptiness. Learning continues in whispered conversations and the gentle scratch of styluses on wax tablets. Students practice their letters in the soft wax, erasing and rewriting the same passages until muscle memory guides their hands even in dim light. You pass a young novice hunched over his writing tablet. His lips move silently as he copies Latin verses, each word carefully formed. These students, some as young as 7 years old, arrive here not because their families are wealthy, but because they show promise. Many come from peasant families who can barely spare them. The church offers one of the few paths to literacy and learning for those born outside nobility. The warming room draws you with its promise of heat. Here, a proper fire crackles in a large hearth, casting dancing shadows on stone walls. A handful of older students cluster around wooden tables, sharing the precious warmth while they work. One carefully scrapes a piece of parchment with a curved knife, preparing it for tomorrow's copying work. Another mixes pigments in tiny clay pots, grinding minerals into powder that will become brilliant blues and golds in tomorrow's illuminated letters. Winter evenings in the cloister follow ancient rhythms. After Compline, the formal teaching day ends, but learning transforms into something more intimate. Master Thomas sits near the fire, speaking quietly with 3 advanced students about the nature of light. His voice barely rises above a whisper, but his words carry clearly in the stone chamber. They discuss whether light is a substance or a quality, drawing on recently translated works of Aristotle that most of the outside world has never heard of. These informal evening discussions often prove more valuable than formal lessons. Here, away from the rigid structure of daylight hours, minds open to new possibilities. Students dare to ask questions they would never voice in formal class. Masters share doubts and uncertainties they hide during official instruction. Knowledge flows in all directions, not just from teacher to student. Let us stop here for a moment, fellow travellers. If you are finding peace in this journey through medieval winter nights, please consider joining our community of nighttime history explorers by subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. A gentle tap on the like button helps us continue bringing you these quiet escapes into the past. We would love to know in the comments where you are settling in to listen tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now let us return to our cloister, where the night's learning has only just begun. The scriptorium calls to you through an arched doorway. Here, the most important work of the cloister takes place. Rows of wooden desks line the room, each equipped with a slanted writing surface and small wells for ink. Even in winter, copyists work here by candlelight, carefully reproducing the texts that preserve all human knowledge. Brother Marcus bends over a page of Boethius, his reed pen moving with practiced precision. Each letter must be perfect. A single mistake could corrupt a philosophical argument for generations to come. The ink he uses comes from oak galls, those strange round growths you might have noticed on oak trees. Mixed with iron and wine, they create a permanent black ink that will outlast empires. But winter makes this work challenging. Ink freezes in the wells on the coldest nights. Parchment becomes brittle and can crack if handled roughly. Scribes develop techniques unknown to summer workers. They warm their ink pots against small braziers. They breathe on their hands between each word to keep fingers flexible. Most people think medieval scribes worked in isolation, but actually they often worked in teams. One person might prepare all the parchment for a project, another specializes in copying text, a third adds decorative capital letters. The most skilled artists save the elaborate illuminations for last, painting miniature worlds in the margins of sacred texts. During long winter evenings, you can hear the soft murmur of collaboration as they coordinate their efforts. The library beckons from across the courtyard. Here, books rest chained to wooden lecterns, not from mistrust, but from love. These volumes represent years of human labour and contain knowledge found nowhere else in Europe. The chain allows the book to be opened and read, but prevents it from wandering away. Students develop strong arms from lifting these heavy volumes, bound in thick wooden boards covered with leather and metal clasps. Brother Anselm tends the library with devotion that borders on worship. He knows every volume by touch, can locate any passage in the darkness by running his fingers along familiar spines. Tonight he guides a visiting scholar to a rare copy of Euclid's Geometry, recently translated from Arabic. The scholar's eyes widen as he opens to diagrams that will revolutionize his understanding of mathematical relationships. This moment of discovery, repeated countless times throughout winter evenings, slowly builds the intellectual foundation of what historians will later call the Renaissance. The warming room becomes the heart of evening life as temperatures drop. Here, the rule of silence relaxes slightly. Necessary communication is permitted. Students help each other with difficult passages in Latin or Greek. They share techniques for preparing parchment or mixing paint. Older students mentor younger ones, creating bonds that will last lifetimes. Many future bishops, abbots, and scholars trace their deepest friendships to these quiet winter evenings by the fire. The food here surprises visitors with its quality and abundance. Monasteries maintain extensive gardens, fish ponds, and livestock. Even in winter, the brothers eat well. Root vegetables stored in cool cellars, preserved fish and meat, fresh bread baked daily in ovens built into the thick stone walls. Hot soup appears regularly during evening study sessions, carried in wooden bowls that warm cold hands as much as they nourish hungry bodies. As midnight approaches, the cloister settles into its deepest quiet. A few dedicated scholars remain at their work, but most have retired to simple cells for sleep. Tomorrow will bring new lessons, new manuscripts to copy, new ideas to explore. But tonight belongs to reflection and rest, to dreams that might contain tomorrow's insights, to the peaceful satisfaction of knowledge preserved and transmitted across the generations. The first sign of winter's true grip appears not in falling snow, but in the subtle changes that ripple through every aspect of cloister life. Brother William discovers it each morning when he enters the scriptorium before dawn. His breath creates small puffs of vapour that drift toward the ceiling, and the inkwells have developed a thin skin of ice that must be carefully broken with a wooden stylus. The sound echoes softly through the chamber, a delicate crack that signals the beginning of winter's longest test. Most people imagine medieval scribes simply enduring the cold, but actually, they developed sophisticated methods to maintain their craft through the harshest months. The brothers construct small warming boxes from clay and metal designed to hold glowing embers beneath their inkwells. These ingenious devices keep ink flowing without creating dangerous open flames near precious parchments. The warmth rises gently, creating tiny columns of heated air that scribes learn to position their hands within as they work. You watch Brother William prepare for his morning's labour. He begins by rubbing his hands together vigorously, then holds them over the warming box until flexibility returns to his fingers. Only then does he pick up his quill. Winter writing requires different rhythms than summer work. Letters must be formed more slowly, with frequent pauses to rewarm stiffened joints. A page that might take 2 hours in July requires 3 or 4 during January's grip. The parchment itself becomes a living thing in winter's grasp. Unlike modern paper, these animal skins respond dramatically to changes in moisture and temperature. On humid winter days, they expand and become soft, almost limp. During dry, cold spells, they contract and grow brittle as autumn leaves. Experienced scribes learn to read these moods, adjusting their pressure and technique accordingly. They keep scraps of parchment nearby to test their quills, ensuring each stroke will flow properly on the precious working surface. A soft footstep announces Brother Marcus entering the scriptorium. He carries a small brazier filled with glowing charcoal, moving carefully to avoid disturbing the still air that might scatter ash onto open manuscripts. This portable heat source will travel with him throughout the morning, positioned just close enough to warm his workspace without risking damage to his materials. The delicate dance between warmth and safety becomes second nature to winter scribes. The chapter house transforms completely when cold settles over the cloister. During warmer months, students spread throughout this large chamber, each finding his preferred spot for concentration. But winter draws them together like iron filings to a magnet. They cluster around the few sources of radiant heat, stone braziers positioned strategically around the room. Their bodies create additional warmth, shared breath, and shared body heat, making study possible in conditions that would defeat solitary scholars. Master Gregory adapts his teaching methods as temperatures drop. Complex philosophical discussions that might unfold over hours during summer must be condensed into shorter segments. Student attention spans shift in the cold, becoming sharper but less sustained. He learns to present the most challenging concepts when minds are freshest, usually in the brief window after morning prayers, when bodies have warmed from walking, but before the cold has penetrated deep into bones. The monastery's heating system reveals medieval engineering at its most clever. Hypercaust systems, inherited from Roman tradition, channel hot air through hollow spaces within the stone walls. The brothers maintain fires in basement chambers that heat air flowing through these hidden passages. The system works so efficiently that some walls remain warm to the touch even on the coldest nights. Students learn which stones hold the most heat, pressing cold hands against these natural warming spots during breaks in their studies. Contrary to popular belief, medieval people did not simply accept cold as an unavoidable hardship. The brothers experiment constantly with methods to improve comfort while maintaining safety. They discover that certain woods burn cleaner and produce more consistent heat. Apple and cherry wood create less smoke than oak or pine. Dried grapevines burn hot and fast, perfect for quickly warming a room before important activities. This knowledge passes from generation to generation, becoming part of the cloister's accumulated wisdom. The library presents unique challenges during winter months. Books themselves suffer in extreme cold. Leather bindings become stiff and crack easily. Parchment pages can break along their edges if handled roughly. The brothers develop careful rituals for winter reading. Books must be warmed gradually before opening, held close to braziers until the bindings regain flexibility. Readers blow warm breath on pages before turning them, preventing sudden temperature changes that might cause damage. Brother Thomas, the librarian, creates a winter reading schedule that rotates the most valuable books away from the coldest spots. The chained volumes nearest windows receive less use during the harshest months. He positions reading lecterns to catch maximum benefit from the warming braziers, while keeping dangerous flames safely distant from irreplaceable texts. Students adapt their research methods, learning to work more efficiently with limited access to certain materials. The warming room becomes the beating heart of winter life, but not in the way most people imagine. Rather than a place for pure relaxation, it serves as the cloister's industrial centre during cold months. Here the brothers prepare materials that will be used throughout the complex. They heat water for cleaning parchments. They warm glues and binding materials to working consistency. They melt wax for sealing important documents and letters. The room's large fireplace burns continuously from November through March, tended by rotating shifts of brothers who understand the precise science of maintaining consistent heat. Different activities require different flame patterns. Manuscript illumination needs steady, moderate heat that won't cause rapid colour changes in mineral pigments. Parchment preparation requires higher temperatures for stretching and scraping animal skins. The fire tender becomes an artist of combustion, reading flames like others read books. Students gather around the central hearth for evening discussions that take on special intimacy in winter's embrace. The circle naturally draws tighter as temperatures drop, creating an atmosphere that encourages deeper sharing of ideas. Voice carries differently in cold air, seeming clearer and more resonant. Conversations that might scatter and fragment in summer heat gain focus and intensity when speakers must lean closer to catch every word. These fireside gatherings produce some of the most innovative thinking in medieval education. Away from the formal structure of daylight lessons, minds freed by warmth and comfort make unexpected connections. A discussion of Aristotle's physics might spark insights about local weather patterns. Mathematical concepts become clearer when explained using the geometry of flames dancing in the hearth. Knowledge cross-pollinates in ways impossible during rigidly structured daylight hours. The brothers develop an elaborate system for managing fuel supplies through winter. Different rooms require different types of combustible materials. The scriptorium uses only the cleanest burning woods to avoid soot that might damage manuscripts. The warming room burns heavier logs that produce long-lasting heat. The kitchen employs fast-burning kindling for cooking fires that must heat quickly and cool rapidly. Managing these supplies requires the organizational skills of a military quartermaster. Food preparation adapts dramatically to winter's demands. The kitchen becomes a center of continuous activity as brothers work to maintain nutrition and warmth simultaneously. Hot broths simmer constantly, providing both sustenance and internal warming for cold scholars. Bread baking increases during the coldest months, as the ovens provide additional heat that radiates throughout the kitchen complex. The brothers time their baking to coincide with evening study sessions, so scholars can warm themselves near the ovens while bread cools. Sleeping arrangements shift subtly as temperatures plummet. While each brother maintains his individual cell, the coldest nights see informal sharing of body heat through closer positioning of sleeping pallets. The dormitory develops its own microclimate as dozens of bodies generate shared warmth in the enclosed stone space. Brothers learn to time their sleep to take advantage of residual heat from evening fires in nearby chambers. The bell tower presents special challenges for the brother responsible for marking prayer times. Climbing the narrow stone stairs requires careful attention to footing when frost makes surfaces treacherous. The bell ropes can freeze stiff, requiring warming treatments before they become pliable enough for proper ringing. Yet these signals remain crucial for maintaining the rhythm of communal life. The sound of bells carries differently in cold air, seeming both sharper and more muted simultaneously. As the deepest part of winter settles over the cloister, routines achieve a crystalline precision born of necessity. Every movement must serve multiple purposes. Every flame must provide maximum benefit with minimum risk. Every gathering of people becomes an opportunity to share and conserve precious warmth. In this demanding season, the medieval pursuit of knowledge reveals its truest character, proving that learning can not only survive but flourish when human ingenuity meets winter's ancient challenge. The soft shuffle of leather soles against stone announces Master Aldrich's approach through the corridor. At 63, he has spent more winters in this cloister than some of his students have lived years, yet his step quickens with anticipation rather than reluctance. Tonight he carries a leather satchel containing correspondence from scholars in Paris, Bologna, and Oxford. These letters will transform the evening from routine study into urgent intellectual exchange, binding this remote monastery to the great conversations shaping medieval thought. Behind him follows young Thomas of Canterbury, barely 14, but already recognized for his gift with languages. The boy carries Master Aldrich's writing materials with careful reverence, understanding that his proximity to learning represents privilege earned through demonstrated ability rather than family wealth. Most people assume medieval education followed rigid class divisions, but actually these cloister schools operated as remarkably fluid meritocracies. Brilliance could elevate a peasant's son to equal footing with nobility, while laziness could see a baron's heir relegated to kitchen duties. The relationship between master and student extends far beyond formal instruction. Master Aldrich remembers his own arrival here 30 years ago, a frightened boy from a village whose name appears on no maps. Brother Benedict took him under protection, sharing not just knowledge but warmth, food and encouragement during the long process of intellectual awakening. Now Aldrich extends similar care to Thomas, understanding that knowledge transferred through kindness takes deeper root than information conveyed through fear. You observe their interaction as they settle near the warming room's central hearth. Master Aldrich does not simply lecture while Thomas listens. Instead, they engage in genuine dialogue, with the master posing questions designed to stretch his students' understanding while remaining alert for insights that might emerge from a younger perspective. Medieval pedagogy recognized that learning flows in multiple directions, that students often perceive connections their masters might miss. Brother Jerome joins them, carrying a manuscript that poses translation challenges. At 45, he occupies the complex middle ground between student and master, advanced enough to tackle difficult texts but still learning the subtle arts of interpretation. This creates no awkwardness or confusion. The cloister hierarchy depends not on rigid rank, but on flowing expertise. Jerome defers to Aldrich's experience with Aristotelian philosophy, while Aldrich acknowledges Jerome's superior knowledge of Greek grammar. Thomas, despite his youth, commands respect for his intuitive grasp of linguistic patterns. The evening's work begins with Jerome presenting his translation problem. The Greek text contains a word that might mean either substance or essence, and the choice will alter the entire meaning of a crucial philosophical passage. Rather than issuing authoritative pronouncement, Master Aldrich guides the discussion through careful questioning. He asks Thomas to examine the word's usage in other contexts, then requests Jerome's assessment of how different translations might affect the author's overall argument. This collaborative approach reflects medieval understanding of knowledge as communal property rather than individual possession. Unlike modern academic culture with its emphasis on original research and personal achievement, medieval scholars saw themselves as custodians of inherited wisdom. Their goal was not to create new knowledge, but to preserve, understand, and transmit the insights of ancient authorities. This perspective fostered cooperation over competition, shared inquiry over individual advancement. Brother William approaches from the scriptorium, his ink-stained fingers testimony to hours spent copying Boethius. At 28, he represents the skilled craftsman class within the cloister's intellectual community. His role requires perfect technical execution without demanding deep theoretical understanding. Yet the brothers never treat him as merely a manual labourer. His opinions on textual variants carry weight because his careful eye catches errors that escape more theoretically minded scholars. The community recognizes that perfect copying requires a form of intelligence different from, but equal to, philosophical analysis. The conversation shifts as William describes discovering what appears to be a scribal error in his source text. The passage makes no grammatical sense, suggesting either corruption during previous copying or a gap in his own understanding. Master Aldrich examines the problematic sentence, while Jerome and Thomas offer suggestions. This scene repeats nightly throughout medieval Europe as communities of scholars work together to maintain textual integrity across generations of hand copying. Brother Marcus enters quietly, carrying wooden bowls of hot soup that steam in the cool air. At 52, he serves as the cloister's practical administrator, managing everything from food supplies to building maintenance. Most people imagine medieval monasteries as purely spiritual communities, but actually they functioned as complex economic enterprises, requiring sophisticated management skills. Marcus commands deep respect, not for his scholarly achievements, but for his ability to ensure the material conditions that make scholarship possible. His presence reminds everyone that intellectual work depends on practical support. The soup he serves contains vegetables from gardens he planned and supervised. The firewood warming the room was cut and stored under his direction. The candles illuminating their manuscripts were made from wax produced by beehives he tends. Without Marcus and others like him, the most brilliant philosophical discussions would remain impossible dreams. The hierarchy here operates through subtle signals rather than overt displays of rank. Master Aldrich receives his soup first, but this reflects practical necessity rather than pompous privilege. As the eldest, he feels the cold most severely and needs warmth to maintain the mental clarity required for complex discussions. Thomas receives his bowl last, but this too serves practical purpose. His young body generates heat more efficiently, allowing him to remain comfortable longer without nourishment. These arrangements develop organically over years of shared experience rather than through imposed regulations. Each member learns how to support the other's strengths while compensating for their limitations. Master Aldrich's vast knowledge combines with Jerome's linguistic precision, William's technical skill, and Thomas's fresh perspective to create intellectual achievements none could accomplish alone. The evening's discussion reveals the sophisticated nature of medieval theological education. They examine a passage from Augustine that seems to contradict earlier statements by the same author. Rather than dismissing this as simple inconsistency, they explore whether Augustine might have been addressing different audiences or responding to different challenges. This analysis requires not just textual knowledge, but understanding of historical context, rhetorical strategy, and psychological insight. Brother Peter arrives from the library carrying a volume that might illuminate their question. At 38, he serves as the cloister's memory bank, able to locate relevant passages from hundreds of different texts. His arrival demonstrates another aspect of medieval scholarly culture that modern people often miss. These communities maintained vast amounts of information through human memory rather than written indexes. Peter can recall not just which book contains specific information, but exactly where on the page that information appears. The discussion that follows reveals the collaborative nature of medieval textual analysis. Each participant contributes different expertise to build collective understanding. Master Aldrich provides theological framework. Jerome offers grammatical analysis. William notes textual variations between different manuscript copies. Thomas raises questions that force everyone to examine their assumptions. Peter supplies supporting evidence from related sources. Together, they construct interpretations that none could achieve individually. Their work methods would surprise modern scholars accustomed to silent, solitary research. Medieval intellectual work was fundamentally communal, conducted through conversation and debate. Knowledge emerged through dialogue rather than private contemplation. Ideas achieved validity through testing against the insights and objections of knowledgeable peers rather than through individual certainty. The warming room gradually fills as other brothers complete their evening tasks. Brother Francis brings samples of pigments he has been preparing for manuscript illumination. Brother Simon carries mathematical instruments for calculating astronomical positions. Brother David brings musical notation he has been composing for tomorrow's services. Each specialty contributes to the community's overall intellectual life, while remaining connected to the central mission of preserving and transmitting knowledge. These gatherings create bonds that transcend formal, hierarchical relationships. Master Aldrich may hold ultimate authority over theological questions, but he seeks Brother Francis's advice about visual representations of abstract concepts. Brother Simon's mathematical expertise earns deference from scholars whose theological knowledge far exceeds his own. The community functions through networks of mutual dependence rather than simple chains of command. Conflicts do arise, but they follow different patterns than modern academic disputes. Personal rivalries seem less common, perhaps because individual achievement matters less than collective success. When disagreements occur, they typically focus on interpretive questions rather than territorial disputes. The brothers debate whether a particular Greek word should be translated one way or another, but they do not compete for limited resources or exclusive recognition. The physical environment shapes these relationships in subtle but important ways. The warming room's limited space requires everyone to sit close together, making private conversations difficult and encouraging participation in group discussions. The need to share heat sources creates natural gathering points that bring different specialties into contact. The common schedule of prayers and meals ensures regular interaction between all community members regardless of their specific roles. As the evening progresses, Master Aldrich begins showing signs of fatigue. His responses slow slightly, and he occasionally pauses to gather his thoughts. Rather than pushing through exhaustion, he gradually transfers leadership of the discussion to Brother Jerome. This transition occurs smoothly, without formal announcement or ceremony. Everyone understands that preserving the Master's long-term effectiveness matters more than completing any single evening's work. Thomas notices the shift and begins organizing the manuscripts and writing materials for storage. His careful attention to these practical details demonstrates how thoroughly he has absorbed the community's values. Knowledge requires not just intellectual understanding, but practical stewardship. Books must be properly stored, writing materials cleaned and prepared, fire safely banked for the night. The youngest member taking responsibility for these tasks shows how successfully the community transmits its culture across generations. The brotherhood of knowledge that governs winter evenings in this cloister creates something larger than the sum of its individual parts, a living tradition that transforms both ancient wisdom and contemporary understanding through the patient work of minds devoted to learning's sacred trust. The bronze bell high above the cloister releases its first deep note into the pre-dawn darkness, the sound rolling across stone corridors like water flowing downhill. Brother Augustine, the timekeeper, has climbed the narrow tower stairs in complete darkness, his bare feet finding each worn step through muscle memory developed over 15 years. The bell's voice calls the community to matins, the night office that begins each day's sacred rhythm. But this is not the harsh interruption of sleep that many imagine. The brothers have trained their bodies to wake naturally moments before the bell sounds, their internal rhythms synchronized with centuries of monastic tradition. You hear the soft rustle of wool robes as figures emerge from individual cells, moving through corridors with the quiet efficiency of those who understand that haste disturbs contemplation. Most people think medieval monks stumbled through their duties in groggy confusion, but actually, these communities developed sophisticated methods for maintaining alertness during night prayers. The brothers time their evening meals and sleep to optimize their energy for these pre-dawn services. They consume lighter foods in the hours before matins, avoiding the sluggishness that comes from heavy digestion during sleep. The chapel fills with the whispered shuffle of leather soles on stone, as 32 voices prepare to join in ancient melodies. Master Aldrich takes his place in the choir stalls, but his position reflects liturgical function rather than academic rank. Brother Francis, whose scholarly achievements are modest, leads the singing because his voice carries the pure clarity needed for proper chant. The chapel's acoustics, carefully designed by medieval architects, amplify and blend individual voices into something approaching angelic harmony. The psalms that flow through the winter darkness serve purposes beyond worship that modern people rarely understand. These rhythmic texts, chanted in Latin, provide continuous mental exercise that keeps scholarly minds sharp. The complex grammar and poetic structure of psalm verses require active engagement, preventing the drowsy passivity that might overtake listeners of simpler prayers. Students like Thomas find that daily psalm recitation improves their ability to parse difficult philosophical texts by training their minds to hold multiple grammatical relationships in simultaneous awareness. Brother Simon strikes the wooden cimatron with practiced precision, its hollow percussion marking transitions between different parts of the service. This instrument, inherited from Eastern Christian tradition, creates rhythms that help maintain attention during lengthy prayers. The pattern of strikes follows ancient mathematical principles that medieval musicians understood intuitively. The intervals between beats correspond to numerical ratios that scholars like Boethius identified as fundamental to universal harmony. The service concludes with a moment of profound silence that prepares minds for the transition from worship to study. This pause serves practical as well as spiritual functions. The brothers use these moments to assess their mental state, determining whether they feel alert enough for demanding intellectual work or need additional rest before tackling complex manuscripts. Self-awareness becomes a crucial skill in communities where individual exhaustion can disrupt collective productivity. As the community disperses from chapel, you notice how naturally the transition unfolds. There is no jarring shift from sacred to secular activity. Instead, the brothers understand scholarship as a form of prayer, intellectual work as a type of devotion. This integration distinguishes medieval learning from modern academic culture, which often treats religious faith and scholarly inquiry as separate or competing activities. For these monks, studying Aristotle or copying Augustine serves God as directly as chanting psalms or celebrating Mass. Master Aldrich returns to his cell for a brief period of private prayer and preparation. This quiet time allows him to review the day's planned lessons while maintaining the contemplative state that prayer has established. Medieval educators understood that teaching requires more than intellectual preparation. The master's spiritual condition affects his ability to communicate complex ideas clearly and inspire students to deeper understanding. A teacher distracted by personal concerns or approaching lessons with purely academic rather than spiritual motivation will fail to achieve the transformation that genuine education requires. The scriptorium comes alive as Brother William and his fellow copyists begin their morning work. Contrary to popular belief, these monks do not approach manuscript copying as mechanical drudgery. Instead, they understand their work as a form of lectio divina, sacred reading that transforms both scribe and text. Each word copied becomes an opportunity for meditation, each sentence an invitation to deeper contemplation. William often discovers new meanings in familiar passages through the slow, careful process of reproduction. The schedule of prayer services creates natural breaks that prevent the mental fatigue that would otherwise accumulate during hours of concentrated copying. Terce at mid-morning, sext at noon, and none in mid-afternoon provide regular opportunities to rest eyes strained by close work and stretch muscles cramped by hunching over writing desks. These interruptions increase rather than decrease productivity by maintaining alertness throughout long working days. Brother Jerome uses the time between Matins and Lauds for his most challenging translation work. The pre-dawn hours offer ideal conditions for tackling difficult Greek texts that require sustained concentration. His mind remains fresh from sleep, but alert from prayer, creating optimal conditions for the complex mental gymnastics that translation demands. The choir of early morning eliminates distractions that might interrupt the delicate process of moving meaning from one language to another, while preserving subtle nuances of philosophical argument. The bell tower becomes Brother Augustine's observatory as well as timekeeper. Medieval monasteries maintained sophisticated understanding of astronomical cycles that guided both religious observances and agricultural activities. Augustine tracks the gradual changes in sunrise timing throughout winter, adjusting the interval between matins and lauds to maintain proper spacing of prayers while accommodating seasonal variations in daylight. This requires mathematical calculations that rival those performed by university scholars in their theoretical studies. Young Thomas discovers that the rhythm of prayer services provides structure for his own learning process. The intervals between offices create natural study periods of predictable duration, allowing him to plan his reading to achieve specific goals before the next service. Rather than constraining his intellectual development, the monastic schedule provides a framework that enables deeper concentration by eliminating the anxiety of unlimited time. Knowing that Terce will interrupt his studies in 2 hours, Thomas focuses more intently on his current text than he might during an unstructured day. The warming room transforms during the hours between prime and terce into an informal classroom where practical education occurs alongside formal instruction. Master Aldrich leads discussions about theological questions, while Brother Marcus demonstrates techniques for maintaining writing instruments. Brother Francis explains principles of colour theory while preparing pigments for manuscript illumination. Students learn that all knowledge interconnects, that practical skills support theoretical understanding, while abstract principles guide practical application. Lauds brings the entire community together as winter dawn gradually lightens the chapel windows. The timing of this service creates a moment of profound transition as artificial light gives way to natural illumination. Medieval monks understood this daily transformation as a symbol of spiritual enlightenment, the movement from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. Students find that concepts studied by candlelight often achieve new clarity when reviewed in daylight, as if the change in illumination triggers fresh insights. The chapter meeting that follows Lauds serves functions that extend beyond administrative necessity. Master Gregory uses this gathering to coordinate the day's educational activities, ensuring that different classes do not conflict with one another while maximizing the use of limited resources like heated rooms and expensive books. But the meeting also provides an opportunity for intellectual cross-pollination as masters from different specialties share insights that might prove useful in other fields. Brother Peter presents a brief report on the library's winter conservation efforts, describing techniques for protecting manuscripts from humidity and temperature fluctuations. His presentation educates everyone about the material basis of their intellectual work while reinforcing the community's shared responsibility for preserving knowledge. Students learn that scholarship requires not just mental effort, but physical care of the tools and resources that make learning possible. The morning work period that follows chapter meeting reflects the careful integration of spiritual and intellectual rhythms. Classes begin with brief prayers that focus minds on the sacred dimension of learning, but these devotions remain short enough to avoid consuming time needed for substantial instruction. Master Aldrich opens his philosophy class by asking divine assistance in understanding difficult concepts, then immediately transitions to close analysis of Aristotelian logic. Students experience no discontinuity between prayer and study, because both activities serve the same fundamental purpose of drawing closer to divine truth. The system of canonical hours creates what medieval thinkers called the sanctification of time, the transformation of ordinary duration into sacred opportunity. Each prayer service marks not just a chronological division, but a spiritual transition that prepares minds for different types of activity. The brothers understand that intellectual work performed in proper spiritual context achieves results impossible through purely secular effort. Knowledge acquired through divinely oriented study takes deeper root and bears more lasting fruit than information gained through mere academic curiosity. Sext interrupts the morning's intellectual activities at precisely the moment when minds begin to tire from sustained concentration. The noon office provides rest and refreshment that enables productive afternoon work, but it also offers perspective on the morning's achievements. Students often find the problems which seemed intractable before prayer become solvable afterward, not because divine intervention provides magical solutions, but because worship clears mental obstacles that prevent recognition of answers already present but previously unnoticed. The refectory becomes an extension of the classroom during the midday meal that follows sext. While one brother reads aloud from edifying texts, others reflect on connections between the passage being read and their morning studies. Table reading serves multiple educational functions, exposing students to works they might not encounter in their specialized classes, while providing practice in listening comprehension of Latin prose. The silence maintained during meals creates conditions for deep reflection rather than superficial social interaction. Numb, the mid-afternoon office, marks the beginning of the day's most productive study period. Medieval educators understood that mental energy follows predictable cycles throughout the day, reaching peak effectiveness during the hours between midday rest and evening fatigue. Advanced students use this time for their most challenging work, tackling texts that require maximum concentration and analytical skill. Master Aldrich schedules his most complex lectures during these afternoon hours when student minds operate at optimal capacity. The approaching winter darkness visible through chapel windows during numb reminds the community that each day's intellectual achievements must be balanced against the eternal perspective that prayer provides. The brothers understand that knowledge pursued for its own sake can lead to spiritual pride, while learning oriented toward divine service contributes to both individual salvation and collective welfare. The rhythm of prayer and study creates constant reminders of this essential balance, preventing scholars from losing themselves in purely academic pursuits, while ensuring that devotion remains intellectually informed rather than emotionally shallow. The soft scraping sound echoes through the scriptorium as Brother Francis draws his curved knife across a stretched calf skin, each stroke removing another layer of remaining flesh and fat. His movements follow patterns learned through 20 years of parchment preparation, the blade held at precisely the angle that removes material without cutting through the precious membrane. Most people imagine medieval scribes simply grabbed any animal skin and began writing, but actually, parchment creation required skills rivaling those of master craftsmen in any trade. The skin before him began its transformation 6 months ago when a young calf died on the monastery's farm. Brother Marcus, who oversees practical matters, immediately recognized its potential. The hide was carefully removed and transported to the parchment workshop, where it began a complex process that would ultimately create writing surfaces finer than any paper produced for centuries to come. Winter proves the ideal season for this work, as cold temperatures slow bacterial decay while maintaining the moisture levels necessary for proper processing. You watch Brother Francis examine the skin's surface under the steady glow of an oil lamp, searching for imperfections that might compromise the finished product. Small holes left by insects or scratches from thorns must be carefully patched with thin strips of similar parchment, the repairs so skillfully executed that only expert eyes can detect them. The best parchment makers develop an almost supernatural ability to read animal skins, understanding how factors like the creature's age, diet, and season of death will affect the final writing surface. The preparation process reveals the sophisticated chemistry that medieval artisans mastered without formal scientific training. The hide soaks for days in lime solutions that remove hair and partially break down proteins, transforming tough animal skin into flexible writing material. Brother Francis tests the lime's strength by touch, his experienced fingers detecting subtle changes that indicate when the chemical process has progressed sufficiently. Too little time in lime leaves the parchment rough and hairy. Too much dissolves essential fibers that provide strength and durability. After lime treatment comes the most demanding phase of preparation. The skin stretches on a wooden frame that holds it under precise tension while Brother Francis scrapes away remaining tissue and smooths the surface. This work requires extraordinary physical control, as too much pressure cuts through the membrane, while too little fails to achieve the silky smoothness that quality writing demands. Master parchment makers develop powerful forearms and sensitive hands that can feel differences in thickness measured in fractions of millimeters. Brother Matthias enters the workshop carrying tools that sparkle in the lamplight. His pumice stones, imported at great expense from Mediterranean volcanic regions, will provide the final surface preparation that transforms rough parchment into writing material worthy of sacred texts. The grinding process removes microscopic irregularities that would catch quill points and cause ink to blot or feather. Different grades of pumice serve different purposes, from coarse stones that handle major surface corrections to fine powders that create the ultimate smoothness required for delicate illumination work. The finished parchment emerges from this process with qualities that seem almost magical to modern observers. The surface possesses a slight nap that grips ink perfectly, while remaining smooth enough to allow easy pen movement. It responds to humidity changes by becoming more or less flexible, helping scribes adjust their writing pressure to match environmental conditions. Most remarkably, quality parchment can last for centuries without significant deterioration, preserving texts that might otherwise disappear from human knowledge. Brother Francis begins preparing the day's writing sheets by cutting large parchment pieces into standard sizes. Medieval books followed precise dimensional ratios that optimized both material usage and visual harmony. The proportions derive from mathematical principles that medieval scholars understood as reflections of divine order in the created universe. A properly proportioned page guides the reader's eye through text in patterns that enhance comprehension while creating aesthetic pleasure that elevates the soul toward contemplation of beauty itself. The ruling process transforms blank parchment into structured writing space. Brother Francis uses a sharp stylus to score faint lines that will guide the scribe's hand, ensuring consistent letter heights and uniform spacing between lines. This preparatory work requires mathematical precision, as errors in ruling propagate through entire manuscripts, creating visual discord that distracts readers from textual content. Master rulers develop the ability to create parallel lines of perfect consistency using only hand-eye coordination and years of experience. Young Thomas watches this preparation work with fascination that extends beyond mere curiosity. As a student destined for advanced scholarly work, he understands that knowledge of parchment making will enhance his appreciation for the manuscripts he studies. Books become more precious when readers understand the months of skilled labour required to create writing surfaces, the rare materials needed for inks and pigments, the countless hours of careful copying that transform blank parchment into repositories of human wisdom. The scriptorium's atmosphere changes subtly as afternoon light fades and candles become the primary illumination. Brother William adjusts his writing position to catch maximum benefit from his oil lamp's steady flame, the light falling across his parchment at the angle that minimizes shadows while providing clear visibility of his work. Medieval scribes developed techniques for optimizing artificial light that modern office workers might envy, understanding how flame position affects both visual clarity and working comfort. His reed pen moves across the parchment with practiced confidence, each letter formed according to standards that have remained unchanged for generations. The script he employs, called Carolingian minuscule, represents one of medieval civilization's great achievements in visual communication. These letter forms achieve perfect balance between clarity and beauty, remaining easily readable while possessing aesthetic qualities that transform mere writing into visual art. Modern typography still draws inspiration from these medieval innovations in letterform design. The ink flowing from Brother William's pen contains ingredients that medieval craftsmen gathered from across the known world. Oak galls provide the basic black colour, their tannins reacting with iron salts to create permanent pigment that will outlast empires. Wine adds fluidity and prevents the ink from becoming too thick during winter weather. Gum arabic, imported from North Africa, provides binding agents that help ink adhere to parchment while maintaining flexibility that prevents cracking as pages age. Brother Francis begins the delicate work of mixing pigments for the day's illumination projects. His materials read like an inventory of medieval international commerce. ultramarine blue ground from lapis lazuli carried by caravan from Afghan mountains, vermilion red derived from Spanish mercury deposits, gold leaf beaten thin enough to seem transparent, yet retain the precious metal's eternal luster. Each pigment requires different preparation methods and responds uniquely to changes in temperature and humidity. The ultramarine preparation alone demonstrates the sophisticated chemistry that medieval artists mastered through empirical experimentation. The raw lapis lazuli must be ground to exact fineness, fine enough to create smooth colour, but not so fine that the particles lose their blue intensity. Brother Francis tests each batch by making small sample paintings on parchment scraps, adjusting the grinding time until the colour achieves the deep celestial blue that medieval viewers associated with divine transcendence. Contrary to popular belief, medieval illuminators did not work in isolation, but collaborated closely with the scribes who prepared their texts. Brother Francis studies Brother William's completed pages carefully, planning decorative elements that will enhance rather than compete with the written content. The relationship between text and illustration follows sophisticated principles that balance visual impact with scholarly utility. Decorations must attract attention without distracting from meaning, beautify pages without overwhelming textual authority. The gold leaf application requires skills that border on the supernatural. Brother Francis breathes on the thin metal sheets to make them adhere to his brush, then transfers them to prepared parchment areas with movements so gentle they barely disturb the air. A single wrong gesture can tear the delicate leaf beyond repair, wasting materials that cost more than most peasants earn in entire seasons. Master illuminators develop hand steadiness that surgeons might envy, combined with artistic vision that transforms precious materials into windows opening onto celestial realities. The workshop maintains multiple works in progress simultaneously, as different stages of manuscript creation require varying environmental conditions. Newly mixed pigments need warm, dry air to achieve proper consistency. Gold leaf application works best in slightly humid conditions that prevent static electricity from disturbing delicate materials. Parchment preparation requires moderate temperatures that keep materials flexible without encouraging bacterial growth. Brother Francis orchestrates these competing demands like a conductor managing a complex musical score. Medieval illumination techniques achieve effects that modern printing cannot duplicate. The slight irregularities in hand-ground pigments create subtle colour variations that give medieval paintings their distinctive liveliness. Gold leaf applied over slightly textured surfaces catches and reflects light differently from various viewing angles, making illuminated letters seem to glow with inner fire. These qualities emerge from the handcraft process itself, rather than conscious artistic choices, demonstrating how medieval production methods naturally generated beauty that mechanical reproduction struggles to match. The evening's work session reveals the contemplative dimension of illumination that distinguishes it from mere decoration. Brother Francis approaches each decorative initial as an opportunity for meditation on the text it introduces. The passage about divine mercy might inspire flowing vine patterns that suggest growth and abundance. Discussion of theological mysteries could generate geometric designs that reflect the mathematical order underlying creation. The illuminator becomes a visual theologian, translating abstract concepts into concrete images that guide readers toward deeper understanding. The candlelit workshop creates an atmosphere of almost mystical concentration as multiple artisans work on different aspects of manuscript production. The soft sounds of brush against parchment, knife against skin, stylus against ruling board blend into a rhythm that seems to echo the monastic hours themselves. Each craftsman understands his role in a larger creative process that transforms raw materials into vehicles for preserving and transmitting the most important ideas human civilization has produced. As winter night deepens around the scriptorium, the work continues under pools of golden light that turn each workspace into a small universe of concentrated creativity. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new manuscripts to copy, new illuminations to create. But tonight belongs to the ancient craft of giving physical form to human knowledge, ensuring that wisdom hard won by previous generations will survive to enlighten minds not yet born into the world. The final bell of Compline fades into silence, its bronze voice absorbed by stone walls that have witnessed centuries of such evenings. The great silence descends over the cloister like a gentle blanket, marking the transition from communal activity to private reflection. Yet silence here does not mean emptiness or cessation. Instead, it creates space for the deepest forms of learning, the kind that occurs when minds freed from the necessity of speech can turn inward to digest the day's accumulated knowledge. Brother William caps his ink well and carefully cleans his reed pen. These simple actions performed with the reverence of ritual. His day's work lies before him on the writing desk. 24 lines of perfect Carolingian script that will carry Augustine's words across centuries to readers not yet imagined. The parchment still bears faint impressions from his stylus, where he corrected minor errors, evidence of the human care invested in preserving divine wisdom. Tomorrow he will begin the next page, but tonight the manuscript rests under protective cloth, safe from dust and moisture. Young Thomas returns the day's borrowed books to their proper places in the library, his movements guided by memory through corridors where artificial light creates pools of warmth in the encompassing darkness. Each volume represents countless hours of labour by scribes, illuminators, and binders whose names history will never record. Yet their anonymous devotion ensures that Aristotle's logic, Boethius's philosophy, and Augustine's theology remain available to future generations of seekers after truth. The warming room gradually empties as individual brothers retire to their cells for the night's rest. Master Aldrich banks the central fire carefully, arranging logs to burn slowly through the dark hours while minimizing risk of dangerous flares. His movements reflect decades of experience with winter fires, understanding gained through patient observation of how different woods burn under varying conditions. This practical knowledge, passed from master to student through demonstration rather than formal instruction, represents another strand in the complex web of learning that sustains medieval intellectual life. Brother Francis completes his evening inventory of pigments and tools, ensuring that tomorrow's illumination work can begin without delay. His brushes hang in precise order according to size and function, their bristles shaped and conditioned for specific applications. The gold leaf rests between sheets of vellum, protected from air currents that might disturb its delicate structure. Each material occupies its designated place in a system refined through generations of artistic practice, embodying the medieval understanding that beauty emerges from order rather than chaos. The monastery settles into its nighttime rhythm as individual lights disappear, one by one, behind cell doors. Yet learning continues in forms that daylight hours cannot accommodate. Brother Jerome lies on his narrow bed, mentally reviewing the Greek passages that challenged him during the day's translation work. Often, solutions to linguistic puzzles emerge during these quiet hours, when conscious effort gives way to deeper processes of understanding. The mind freed from immediate pressures can make connections that escape it during periods of intense concentration. Master Aldrich kneels beside his bed for the private prayers that conclude each day, but his devotions naturally incorporate the philosophical questions that engaged him during evening discussions. Medieval scholars experienced no conflict between prayer and intellectual inquiry, because both activities sought the same ultimate goal of approaching divine truth. The master's prayers become extensions of his teaching, while his teaching expresses his spiritual devotion in concrete form. The winter night wraps around the cloister like the embrace of an ancient friend, familiar and comforting despite its challenges. These stone walls have weathered countless such nights, sheltering communities of scholars who understood learning as sacred vocation rather than merely professional activity. The cold that might discourage less dedicated seekers becomes another element in the discipline that shapes authentic wisdom, testing commitment while deepening appreciation for knowledge's hard-won rewards. Snow begins falling outside the narrow windows, each flake catching briefly in the candlelight before disappearing into darkness. The weather that isolates this community from the outside world also creates conditions for the concentrated study that produces genuine intellectual breakthrough. Medieval monasteries flourished during winter months precisely because external distractions diminished, allowing minds to focus completely on the texts and ideas that shaped European civilization. The rhythm of monastic life that governs these winter evenings reflects profound understanding of human nature and learning's requirements. The alternation between communal activity and private reflection, between worship and study, between physical labor and mental effort creates conditions that optimize both spiritual development and intellectual achievement. Modern educational institutions might benefit from studying these medieval innovations in organizing human learning communities. Brother Marcus makes his final rounds through the complex, checking that fires are properly banked, doors securely latched, and precious manuscripts protected from winter's potential hazards. His practical vigilance enables the scholarly work that represents the monastery's primary mission, demonstrating once again how intellectual achievement depends on countless forms of material support that often remain invisible to those who benefit from them. The library stands silent in the darkness, its chained volumes waiting for tomorrow's readers. These books represent more than accumulated information. They embody the labour, devotion and sacrifice of generations who understood themselves as links in an unbroken chain of transmission connecting ancient wisdom with future insight. Each manuscript carries not just textual content, but the spiritual energy of all who contributed to its creation and preservation. The scriptorium maintains its orderly arrangement despite the day's intensive activity, tools and materials positioned for efficient resumption of work when morning light returns. The careful preparation that enables productive labour reflects the medieval understanding that external order supports internal harmony, that physical environment influences mental state. Chaos in the workspace creates confusion in thought, while systematic arrangement promotes clarity of mind. Young Thomas drifts toward sleep in his narrow cell, his dreams already beginning to process the day's learning experiences. The intensive exposure to Latin texts, philosophical discussions, and practical demonstrations will continue working in his unconscious mind throughout the night, forming connections and insights that may surprise him when he wakes. Medieval educators understood that genuine learning occurs as much during rest as during formal instruction, that knowledge needs time to settle and integrate before achieving its full effectiveness. The great silence that governs these hours serves purposes that extend beyond simple rest. In the absence of conversation and external stimulation, minds can achieve the stillness necessary for deepest contemplation. The ideas encountered during daylight hours settle like sediment in clear water, revealing patterns and relationships that remained hidden while attention focused on immediate tasks. Silence becomes a teacher as wise as any human master, offering lessons available only to those who learn its discipline. The monastery's winter routine creates a perfect balance between structure and flexibility, between individual initiative and communal support. The fixed schedule of prayers and meals provides stability that enables creative work, while the informal evening discussions allow ideas to develop through spontaneous interaction. This combination produces conditions that both preserve traditional wisdom and generate new insights, ensuring that learning remains alive rather than merely repetitive. The cold that tests these scholars also strengthens them, developing the mental discipline necessary for tackling civilization's most challenging questions. The physical discomfort that might discourage casual students becomes another element in the formation of authentic intellectual character. Medieval monasteries understood that comfort often impedes learning, while controlled hardship can sharpen mental focus and deepen appreciation for knowledge's rewards. As midnight approaches, the cloister achieves the profound stillness that marks successful completion of another day's work. Manuscripts have been copied, pigments prepared, students instructed, and knowledge preserved. The great conversation between past and future continues uninterrupted, carried forward by men who understand their role as custodians rather than owners of human wisdom. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight offers the satisfaction of duty, faithfully performed. The snow continues falling beyond the windows, blanketing the winter landscape in pristine silence that mirrors the peace settling over the monastery. These winter evenings in the medieval cloister school represent more than historical curiosity. They embody principles of learning, community, and devotion that remain relevant across centuries. The integration of practical skill with theoretical knowledge, individual excellence with communal service, spiritual devotion with intellectual rigor creates a model of education that speaks to any age seeking authentic wisdom rather than mere information. The last candle flickers and dies in the warming room, leaving only the glow of banked fires to illuminate the stone corridors. The day's learning continues in dreams and silent meditation, in the slow process by which knowledge transforms into wisdom. Information becomes insight, and study achieves its ultimate goal of drawing human minds closer to eternal truth. The medieval cloister school sleeps, but its mission never rests, carried forward through each new generation of scholars who accept the sacred responsibility of preserving and transmitting humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. Thank you for joining us on this journey through winter evenings in a medieval stone cloister school. If you enjoyed our exploration of this quiet world of learning and are still awake, we invite you to discover more stories from history's forgotten corners in our other content. And if you have drifted off to sleep during our time together, rest well and enjoy the campfire.